The 77th edition of the Vuelta a España is almost upon us. Hot on the heels of the Tour de France, the one question that's going to be on everyone's lips is, can Primoz Roglic win his 4th consecutive title and become the first rider to do so? First up though, we're going to take a look at some of the key stats of this year's race. So this year's race runs from the 19th of August to the 11th of September. It's got 1 team time trial, 1 individual time trial. It's got 4 hilly days, 6 sprints and 9 mountain stages. So, stage 1, we're going to be kicking off with a team time trial. What do you think is going to happen there?
I think we'll get our first glimpse of who the strongest teams are, and we're looking at you, Jumbo-Visma and Ineos Grenadiers, of course. Not massive time gaps as ever at the top. It's more a question of the riders without the stronger teams around them, how much time they do lose. And you're probably you're looking at less than a minute, but obviously it's not a good way to start a Grand Tour for the riders in those teams. But the course is pan flat. There is not 1 metre of elevation gain according to the race profile. Quick Step will be up there. You expect UAE to be up there as well. They're well disciplined, well organised teams. It'll be an interesting opener. And there are a couple of very strong-looking teams in there, and it will be interesting to see how much of an advantage they can gain on that first stage.
So that team time trial is then followed on by 2 more sprint stages in the Netherlands. I'm guessing we're going to see similar teams up there, right?
Yeah, I think so. We'll be looking to the sprint teams, of course, on the more flat stages, and it will be interesting because I don't think it'll feel like the Vuelta a España. You've got 2 stages in the Netherlands, and the flat roads, lots of street furniture, the things we're used to seeing in the Spring Classics. So I think those teams that we're used to seeing in the Spring Classics will be the ones coming to the fore and sort of taking control for those first few stages up there in Utrecht. So it have a very different feel before we get to Spain later on.
So after stage 3, they then got a transfer day down to Spain finally. So what do you think stage 4 is going to bring?
So the riders get that early rest day, and then it's bang straight into it on stage 4 with quite a lumpy stage. What looks like quite a testing little uphill finish into the finish in La Guardia. There's a climb just before that of just over 1,100 metres, so it is testing their climbing legs, and then what looks like quite a steep little finish. And well, we'll certainly get an early indication of who's going well in the GC battle, and you'll look to the riders, like the Ardennes type riders, the riders with a good uphill sprint finish. That's what we'll be looking for the stage win, and obviously, your GC riders not far behind and hoping that no gaps open up in front of them.
And then on to stage 5, we've got 5 categorised climbs, but actually they're not massive, are they? So we shouldn't see anything too crazy happening here, right?
No, I don't think so. I mean, and it's a circuit in Bilbao, so I think the climbs from sea level, but only up to about 400 metres. All of them, they're about that height. So I think it'll make for some quite nice aggressive racing. There's lots of opportunities to attack, but I don't think we'll see any GC movements on that day, unless there are any unforeseen issues, of course. But it looks like almost like a World Championship feel to that, with a circuit finish in Bilbao at the end.
On to stage 6, and that brings us our first mountaintop finish. So that's going to bring us our first GC shake-up, isn't it?
Yeah, so we've got a 12.5 kilometre climb, averaging about 6.5% up to the finish line. So that is easily big enough to put someone in the leader's jersey, probably with a bit of a lead actually, and really see who the contenders are for this year's race. Anyone who misses out today is going to have their work cut out making that time back. So looking at Primoz Roglic, Richard Carapaz, and the riders who want to challenge them.
On to stage 7, and the route profile actually looks a little bit odd because you've got this massive climb in the middle and then it just plateaus out. So how do you think that one's actually going to play out in reality?
Yeah, it's a funny one. The 22 kilometre climb up onto a plateau as they move inland, the Puerto de San Glorio. There are some lumps before that, which is where you'd expect the break to go. It depends how the peloton are feeling, I think, and how strong the break is that goes, because that's a big climb for a break. If it's a mismatched break in terms of strength of the riders, it will just blow to pieces on that big climb, and then it's probably too far over the top. Although it's a lot of downhill, it's probably too far over the top to hold off a peloton if they've got the bit between their teeth. So a really interesting one. Really depends on the size and the makeup of that group. If they can work together up that climb, they can definitely stay away. But yeah, if it's a mix of strength and ability in there, it'll split up and probably won't go anywhere.
On to stage 8, and we've got another big day of climbing. 5 categorised climbs with a summit finish. We should really know who's going well by now, right?
Yeah, an interesting stage, but a bit like some of the Tour stages. Lots and lots of climbing, but quite short. It's only 153 kilometres. But interestingly, something they didn't do at this year's Tour, they are starting going straight up a hill. So go around the team buses and look at who's warming up on their turbo trainers, because this is a chance for it to split straight away, knowing it's not too long and knowing that you could catch people out on that first climb, and a big climb to the finish. Interesting stage. You don't know much about these hills because, well, they're not doing the Pyrenees this year. These are all up in the north of the country, but over to the west of the Pyrenees. So they're not high mountains, but a tough day, especially with that start straight up a big climb.
Stage 9 then actually starts to look like more of the same, doesn't it? It's slightly lower climbs, but they're still categorised. There's still 5 of them, and it's still a little summit finish. So really, I mean, the two are almost indistinguishable.
Well, yeah, I mean, it looks like a grippy day. These climbs definitely don't go as high. It can often depend on the roads. If they're climbs where riders feel like they can get away and escape and get out of sight, out of mind. But if not, they might be more open, especially in the Spanish countryside. That can happen. You know, nice big smooth rolling roads. They don't always suit that really aggressive riding, but a really punchy little finish. Looks quite steep, short, so it doesn't hold any fear for anyone, but it's a great launch pad for someone who fancies the stage win.
And then stage 10 brings us that individual time trial, 31.1k, pan flat. Do we already know who's going to win this one?
No, we don't. I'm actually quite excited about this one. Never been this excited about a time trial. You've got Primoz Roglic, who I can't remember the last time he lost a time trial in Spain. You've got Remco Evenepoel, who is not unbeatable against the clock, but he is right up there. He will push him close. And then you've got young Brit Ethan Hayter, who's had a great season so far, and he's built a lot of that on his time trialling. Like Evenepoel, very powerful and very small, so it gets very low, very aero. It's going to be a really, really interesting stage, that. Quite short, quite punchy, and I don't think Roglic is going to have it all his own way.
Don't know why I did that. So after the TT, where obviously the guys not chasing the GC would have probably had a bit of an easier day, the sprinters are then thrown into a sprint stage for stage 11. It's not completely pan flat. There's a few little lumps, but I think it's fair to say this is just going to finish in a bunch sprint, really, isn't it?
Almost certainly, because there's not been that many opportunities thus far for the sprinters. And a bit like the Tour this year, the course design has been interesting. Quite little uphill finishes, lumpy courses, certainly not many pan flat days since the start up in Utrecht. So I think the sprinters teams will definitely be looking to keep it together, because this is 3 of perhaps 6 opportunities. So there'll be a few guys who haven't won yet. So yeah, I think the sprinters team will be keeping this together.
For sure. And then moving on to the next day, it's pretty much a pan flat day, apart from 2 exceptions. You've got a little precursor climb to then the absolute mountain that you have to go up at the very end. This is going to be a very exciting stage, isn't it?
Right, you'll see all the GC teams lined up at the front of the bunch, keeping this together for that final stage. Well, there might be a break, but they'll be keeping them under control.
Yeah.
They'll be controlling the stage all the way sort of to probably 4-5k to go, because that's a real GC battle on that last climb. So yeah, a very controlled stage up until that last climb, I think.
Stage 13 sees another opportunity for the sprinters, so they've really got to capitalise on these far and few between opportunities. And it is the day before 2 big mountain stages, because there are some pretty brutal finishes coming up. Stage 14, Simon, tell me about it.
Got to finish at 1800 metres, Sierra de la Bandera. Excuse my pronunciation. Yeah, another big GC stage, because it's a long climb. It drags up to the bottom of that climb. You've actually got a peak halfway up it, a small descent, and then you go up again to 1800 metres, and then you've got an even bigger climb the following day down in Sierra Nevada.
Yes. And does that take us to our highest point of the race?
Yeah, it finishes at about 2,500 metres. A lot of the riders will know the Sierra Nevada. It's a popular altitude training camp location. That is the one for the pure climbers. So any South American riders will be looking forward to that one. Anyone who's used to the altitude and has done their altitude training, of course, or who lives at altitude. Because once you get over 2,000 metres, it can really affect your performance. And then they've got a lot of climbing above 2,000 metres on that day. So really tough stage, looking to favour the pure climbers.
Stage 16 sees the penultimate opportunity for the sprinters on a pretty pancake flat stage. And then onto stage 17, it's a bit of a roller, isn't it? There's nothing too defined about it.
No, it's just up and down all day with another climb to the finish. A good day for the break. I think, like a lot of the stages, it looks like the breakaway stages do favour your kind of Alaphilippe type rider, someone who can climb, you can sprint. So yeah, an interesting one, that not big enough for the GC teams to take too much notice. They'll just control the pace on the front of the bunch, you expect. But if a good size determined break goes that day, then I think there'll be odds on to contest the finish.
And then on to stage 18, you do have some slightly more defined climbs in there. You've got 3 categorised climbs. Again, I think this is going to be another day of just kind of controlling what's happening for whoever's in red at the time.
Well, it's an uphill finish rather than a summit finish.
Sure. So
again, the GC riders are going to want to keep it together and get their rider to the finish in good condition. It's not big enough to really have a shake-up. They've just got to be there and be aware and not lose any time, not let any gaps open up. They'll be sprinting for the line, but they won't be sort of tearing strips off each other to gain major time. It'll just be a case of probably all finishing within a couple of seconds of each other.
Stage 19 is a bit of an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's on a circuit, you've got 2 of the same climbs. How's it really going to play out?
Hard to tell, really. I mean, it's quite a short stage as well, under 140 kilometres. Doing the same climb twice is 2 loops, basically, so that they'll know what's to come. You've got such a long descent to the finish. There's no point in GC riders going for it, so I think this is probably, especially at this stage in the race, you've got breakaway written all over this day.
And then bringing us on to stage 20, this is the final chance for the jersey to change hands. It's starting quite high up at about 1,000 metres already, so they're going to be at altitude. 5 categorised climbs, how do you think that's going to play out?
Well, I think usually by this stage in the Grand Tour, you know who's got the best legs.
Yeah.
And it's just a case of that they're probably in the lead by now, so they're controlling it. So I suspect that you will see the leader and his team sort of consolidate that. Probably not with any more time gains, but just in terms of controlling it for that leader. There's no huge climbs that day, so no real chances to gain more time, I don't think. But it just comes down to who's dealing with the fatigue best and recovering well each day, not just from all the stages, but from a lot of transfers that are littered throughout this race. The person who's dealing with that the best will be in the leader's jersey by now.
And then on to stage 21, sprint stage. And really, well, we'll know who's won the overall race, and it's just that final sprint for the kind of final showdown, as it were, to conclude proceedings.
Yeah, it's just which of the sprinters have survived this long. I mean, the Vuelta isn't as tough as the Tour de France and as frantic, so normally the sprinters do make it through to Madrid. They've certainly got a better chance of making it through, and as they've had so few opportunities, they will have wanted to make it through to Madrid. Hopefully there'll still be lots left in the race, and so we'll see a good sprint.
So onto those riders, let's take a look at some of those sprinters, and it's worth mentioning at the moment we are still working off a very provisional start list for the race, so there's definitely going to be some gaps in who we know is going to be going. But from what we think, sprint-wise, who do you think is going to be up there?
Unsurprisingly, the teams aren't really going with strong sprint teams. It looks like we should have Sam Bennett at Bora, Pascal Ackermann at UAE, and Tim Merlier at Alpecin-Deceuninck. So really only 3 pure bunch sprinters are listed at the moment. Unsurprisingly with the parkour, not many pure bunch sprinters, which does open the door for your second tier sprinters, semi-classics riders, people like Jake Stewart making his Grand Tour debut. Be really exciting to see. People like him will be able to get in the mix, I think. So yeah, I think the sprints will be quite open, just because if there's only 3 teams with dedicated sprint trains or have the ability to put dedicated sprint trains on the front at the end, it paves the way for some very interesting and uncontrolled sprints.
Speaking about uncontrolled, I think one guy we cannot forget about is obviously Julian Alaphilippe. I think he's also likely to be up there on some of those punchier uphill finishes, because that's kind of his territory, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, everyone will be, I think, very happy to see him return to racing in recent weeks after a pretty shocking crash in the Ardennes early in the year. So yeah, it'd be very interesting to see what form he's in. He's been looking pretty good in the build-up races so far. It looks like a route tailor-made for him, really. So many stages with potential for riders like him in such a strong team. I suspect he'll win a couple of stages, I think. On
to the GC riders. Who do you think? Because we can always talk about Primoz Roglic, but I mean, he did have an accident at the Tour and he didn't finish the race, which could potentially be beneficial. But who else is going to be up there challenging for it?
I mean, you've got Richard Carapaz going back after being beaten by Jai Hindley at the Giro. Jai Hindley is also on the provisional start list. A lot of interest to see where he goes next. I think when he was second at the Giro a couple of years ago, to Geoghegan Hart, people probably just thought, oh, that was a bit of an anomaly, that result. Coming back this year and winning and beating Carapaz was a massive result. And I'd like to think that him doing his second Grand Tour this year is part of his build-up to competing in next year's Tour. So really interesting to see if he can back up his Giro win with a good ride at the Vuelta. Not necessarily the win, but a good GC ride. Simon Yates, will he be going for the GC? Will he be going for stages? Could do either. Kind of depends on how he's feeling, how his build-up has been. I think he might like to get challenged for GC, having not done it at the Giro, having that slipped away from him. And then of course you've got Remco Evenepoel, who is such an amazing rider in stage races below World Tour level. At Trino Adriatico this year, he was comprehensively beaten by Pogačar, but he's bigged up as a GC rider, and so this is going to be a real test. For him, and really exciting to see what he does over 3 weeks, because he fell away at the Giro last year. He's still only so young, so unsurprising. So this is his next tilt at sort of testing what he can do at a GC. I don't think anyone was expecting him to win it, but if he can push for a podium place at 22, that really just shows what he can do in future years, because what a dream scenario to see him up against Pogačar and Vingegaard in future tours. So this is going to be a really good indication of that.
Now, looking at the provisional start list, there's plenty more names on there. Who else is leaping out at you?
Well, so you got second place last year, Enrico Mas, pulled out the Tour de France, I think very late in the day, stage 19 due to COVID. And he was doing okay, nothing spectacular, but he's obviously got the form. It sounded quite precautionary then pulling him out. They thought it just wasn't worth taking any risks. So yeah, he is going to be up there. Nairo Quintana had a really good Tour de France. He's on the provisional start list as well. And then you've got a trio from Bahrain in Mikel Landa, Pello Bilbao and Jack Haig. Jack Haig, sensational third last year, really leapt out of nowhere. And Bahrain will be looking to put their, I wouldn't say disastrous tour, but disappointing tour behind them and come back strong at the Vuelta. And they've got 3 riders who can challenge. So it'll be interesting to see who comes out on top, just out of that team, who they put all their riders behind. And
onto our fellow countrymen, we've got a few Brits going. Who have we got?
So 5 on the provisional start list at the moment. Chris Froome, Simon Yates need no introduction. But you've actually got 3 Brits potentially making their Grand Tour debut in Ethan Hayter, Jake Stewart, Groupama, and hopefully, after his crash at the Commonwealth Games, Matt Walls from Bora. He is on their provisional start list. He did come out of that very nasty crash on the track. Okay, we think. It'd be interesting to see him. He could, if he's going, he could be there as part of Sam Bennett's lead-out train. Maybe some opportunities for him. He's very quick, not your pure bunch sprinter, so he might actually suit some of those stages. Jake Stewart has kind of moulded himself into a classics rider at the moment, so he'll be just looking for stage opportunities as well and experience. And Ethan Hayter, who was probably on the fringes of making Ineos's tour team after very, very impressive time in Romandy and then the Tour de Suisse just before the race. So big things expected from him as well with the time trials and some of those stages. So yeah, really interesting to see potentially three young British riders making their Grand Tour debuts and seeing who's going to sort of follow through the likes of Geraint Thomas in the next challenges in years to come.
So on to predictions. This feels like a really tough one to call.
Yeah.
What are you thinking for the overall win?
Well, I think... Well, I'll just go with Richard Carapaz. Yeah, I think Ineos will be up for winning a Grand Tour this year. Missed out on the Giro just with Carapaz, third at the Tour. They've had 2 podiums. I think they'll want to finish the season with a win, and they're going with a very strong team. And it's such a strong team, them and Jumbo. I do wonder about Roglic's back, and backs can take a long time to heal up. So it wasn't that long ago when he pulled out with back injury. We're talking a couple of weeks. So I just wonder if that might hamper him a little bit.
Interesting. I think I'm probably going to go with Enric Mas actually, because I think Movistar definitely need it, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, we've all seen the success of Van Vleuten. She's been saving their season this year, but the men's team really need a result this year. Mas was second last year, so that's a good shout.
Points jersey. This one's even tougher to call because you do have a limited number of sprint opportunities, and we've got at the moment a very small list of sprinters we think are going to be going. So from what we know, who are you thinking?
I mean, this is just picking one of 3 or 4 riders. I'm going to go with Tim Merlier, Alpecin-Deceuninck. Not really sure why. Well, I mean, Sam Bennett hasn't had the greatest of seasons. I think he might grab a stage, but whether or not he's got the form to consistently be up there and score all the points, I'm not sure. Pascal Ackermann, I don't think has really done that in a Grand Tour over the course of 3 weeks. So yeah, I'm just gonna go with Tim Merlier for that one.
I think that's a really good shout, and I'm going to agree with you there. On to the young rider. This one's maybe potentially slightly easier to call, and I think we're both agreed on this one. So who do you think it's going to be?
It's probably nailed on for Evenepoel.
Yeah.
I expect to see a top 10 from him. So any young rider in the top 10 should go home with that jersey.
Absolutely. And then King of the Mountains jersey, really tough to call this one. It's, in some ways, it's almost too hard to even predict.
Yeah, I think just pick someone who's a good climber who you know can grab those points. So I'll go Simon Yates.
Okay, that's a nice call. Yeah, no, I think I will go for Quintana. Go really left field. He really needs something this year. So outside of the riders and the stages, what do you think that people need to know about this edition of the Vuelta?
Well, it's quite an interesting one in that there's 2 huge transfers, one down from Utrecht and one basically across Spain from north to southeast. But even after that, a lot of the stages, I think we've looked through the map and there's only one town where it finishes one day and starts the next. There's a transfer between all the stages, and some of them are quite big. So it might come down to who's got the best bus, the best facilities, and it's a real challenge for the backroom staff to help their riders recover well. When they have a 1, 2, 3 hour bus transfer after a stage before they get to their hotels, and fitting in the massage, getting the food into them. You can handle that once or twice, that's quite easy, they're used to it. But day after day after day, really interesting challenge for the teams. And then the routes itself, a lot of them just feel like a lot of individual one-day races clumped together in one country. There's rather than a few stage races, a few flat stages down to a mountainous area where you have some mountain stages followed by rest there, and then you move on somewhere else. It feels like it's one stage done, next one, next one, next one, and not the normal pattern we see.
It doesn't flow quite as nicely, does it? It's a lot more, it's very bitty.
Yeah, so hopefully that'll make some really unpredictable racing and quite exciting racing too.
And Simon, how can people follow along the race as it unfolds?
Well, the magazine will be previewing the race, the August 18th edition, on sale that day. You can get all the stage information and all the riders too, and that's up to date, so we should know the start list by then. And of course, through the race online, we'll be covering every single stage and having all the stories from behind the stages as well.
Perfect, that's great. So do let us know down in the comments who you think is going to be walking away with all of those jerseys, and if you think we forgot anyone. If you enjoyed the video, drop it a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and we'll see you again very soon.